Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up, where each month we take a closer look at some of the key decisions the board takes. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell. My guests today are County Board Chair Libby Garvey and Vice Chair Erik Gutshall. For both of you, congratulations on your leadership roles for this 2020 year. So let's start off with those new leadership roles and kind of your visions, your priorities for the coming year. Libby, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, first is chair. I'll just talk a little bit about the job of the chair, which really is to serve the board and see that the board is able to accomplish what it wants to accomplish. And this is I was 5 times chair of the school board, and this is my second rodeo here as chair. And so the basic job kind of changes. You set the agenda. You need to be, running the meetings, making sure people get a chance to talk. You represent the board to the media, which is it can be a fairly time-consuming issue at times. But every board is a little bit different, and I try very hard to sort of know the personalities of my board members and their interests and make sure that I support them in getting done what they would like to do. So I have some broad priorities as far as, which I talked about in my New Year's Day remarks, which are, equity, continuing what our former chair, Christian Dorsey, did, because equity is something you just don't solve in 1 year. That's an issue, and I'm happy to talk about that. I think equity means different things to different people. To me, in government, it means that government serves everybody well so that everybody can thrive. Traditionally, government, there are people who have a lot of, say, power. Sometimes it's wealth, sometimes it's something else, influence, and they influence government to serve them sometimes better than anybody else. I mean, that's just kind of the human. It's just kind of the human condition. And what we're trying to do, and part of what equity is to make sure we serve everybody, and that's kind of tough. We've got 4 questions to guide us. One is who benefits. It's always a good question. Who's burdened? So who doesn't benefit? Who's missing? Like maybe who haven't we talked to? And how do we know? And if you ask all of those questions, I got them taped up in my office now to try to remind. It's just a kind of a guide to stay focused. So that I'm continuing that one, and then we've got the next one I talked about is innovation. Because if we're going to get into this 21st century solid, we've got to be doing things differently. And I love the definition of innovation, which is removes the barriers from our mind that keeps us from seeing solutions that we ought to see. Interesting. Yeah, and in fact, to get to equity, we've got an old-fashioned way of doing things. One of the barriers is, that person just naturally gets a little more, or that community is a little louder, and we've got to rethink everything we do, even to get to the equity. And then finally, the third kind of focus is resiliency. And that I got just anything we do needs to last. And in fact, if we're resilient, we're going to have an equitable society because we all work together. And if we're going to be resilient, we're going to need to innovate so that we can adapt to the future, both socially and then also just simply like in our infrastructure. We saw that terrible storm July 8th, which made it clear 20th century stormwater infrastructure isn't going to do it for the 21st century. So we're going to have to innovate. And anyway, I'll let my colleague here talk a little bit about what he's up to. But that's kind of in general, serving the board, getting things out there that they want, representing the county, and then trying to keep us focused. That's kind of why I chose those 3 larger areas, just to kind of help keep us all on the same track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very admirable. Erik, how about you?
Yeah, Libby, I think you've done a nice job with your focus on basically those are 3 pillars: the equity, infrastructure, and resiliency, right? Of making sure that that's what makes a quality of life here in Arlington. So I think that's one of the things that I think we can expand on, and quality of life in terms of making sure that our neighborhoods are livable, that they're walkable, that they're safe, safe to walk, and safe to and have places to walk to, right? And so that's where our planning comes in. And so one of the things that I think we need to look at is how our approach to housing and making sure that we have enough housing for everyone and housing across all of the income spectrum, exactly. And so we are in the middle of, we're launching soon a missing middle housing study where we'll be looking at how to bring more options to our neighborhoods of different kinds of places to live. And this is going to, with the focus, it'll have a focus on livability and quality of life, right? We want to welcome more people. We don't necessarily want to welcome their cars, right, for example. So we got to make sure that we're thinking about transportation infrastructure and parking. And we've had issues with stormwater, so we want to, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So as we build more housing, we also want to make sure we build the stormwater infrastructure into that so that we're not exacerbating existing problems. Yeah. We have a segment of our community that is very concerned about what's happening to our tree canopy. So we can also use our housing policy to incentivize the preservation of trees and not just make it what a lot of people are used to seeing in the neighborhood is a builder comes in, buys an old house, tears it down, and clear cuts the lot and takes down all the trees. There's a better way to do things, and that's what we're going to focus on.
We need some innovation.
And that's where the innovation comes in, exactly. So we do need to have this conversation, and it's also, it's a conversation that we're talking about. It's not the board deciding what we will or won't do. I mean, ultimately the decision rests with the board, but the board is looking for the feedback from our communities, from our neighborhoods, from our residents on what is the right way to balance all of these different needs and goals.
Yeah. And in fact, we're going to be out in the community talking to folks. We're going to send out an offer, I think it's tomorrow, a letter to civic associations and organizations saying, please invite us, we'll come. And the 5 of us are going to go out and meet with various groups and do a little presentation. Some of it, what missing middle is and isn't. And I think we get, which I know I'm sure you found, Eric, people think you're talking about income, but in a way, we're not really. If you look at a design, there's a nice graphic that we'll be bringing with us, I'm sure, with like the really high apartment buildings that we've got, in like Roslyn and Crystal City, and then you've got the single family houses, and that's like the other, and then in between, there's not a whole lot of housing that's in between, and we need to getting more. That's sort of the missile. It's a form of housing that we have some of. I actually live in one of those in Fairlington. That's kind of a middle kind of housing with townhouses and attached dwellings. So there's that. But that's kind of what we're going to look at. Can we look at our zoning and look at what we do, and will some of these different? Is there a way to bring in these designs that provide more of a middle way, which I think any healthy community, any resilient community, has got that whole gamut of housing.